Hey everyone, today in this video I'll just like to show you guys how I went about creating a Nuxt module. And for those of us who don't know, a Nuxt module is simply an asynchronous function that allows us to extend the core functionality of Nuxt. They have an official website listing all the official modules. They have 199 of them so far and 931 contributors. So you can visit this website to see all the modules that are available that you can actually use in your Nuxt project. The module that I'll be creating today, I'm going to hook into one of the lifecycle methods of Nuxt and create a socket IO instance that we can actually use throughout our Nuxt application. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so following the documentation, we're just going to use this command to create our Nuxt module. So it's npx nuxt init -t module and then the name of our module. So let's just copy this and head to VS Code and paste it in to get started. So now that we have VS Code open, we'll just open a new terminal and paste that command in and give our module a name. I'm going to call this module Nuxt internal socket. So let me just type that in. And then press enter. Now that our module is created, we can just cd into this folder and install the dependencies. Alright, good. Now that our dependencies are installed, we can just open the folder containing the project with a new VS Code instance. So let me just open this. Alright, so our project is now open in a new VS Code instance, and you can see where the command that we ran just now created a few folders. The source directory, this is where the code for our module will live. This module.ts will be the entry point for our module. We also have a runtime directory that has a plugin file inside of it. And if we want to add a plugin for our module, we can do it in here. We also have this playground folder, and this is a Nuxt 3 application that we can actually use to test out our module while it's being developed. Like I said earlier, the module that we'll be developing will create a socket.io instance, and we'll be able to use it throughout our Nuxt application. So we'll actually need to install socket.io. Before we do that though, it's best to actually run this script dev::prepare so that the tsconfig file gets updated and we get rid of all of these errors that you're seeing. So let's just run npm run dev::prepare. Alright, now that it's finished, you can see that we got rid of all the errors and we can now close this terminal. So let's proceed with installing socket.io. So npm I socket.io, and we will also need to install the client for socket.io. So that's npm I socket.io -client, and now we're good as far as dependencies are concerned. So let's just close our terminal for now and head back to this module.ts folder. Now inside module.ts, you will see that there is a very simple module that's created, and from the top we're importing resolve from the built-in path module that Node provides. We're also pulling in file URL to path, and from Nuxt kit we're getting define Nuxt module and the add plugin functions. Nuxt kit is a package that was actually developed by the Nuxt team, and it just provides composable utilities to make interacting with Nuxt hooks and Nuxt Builder core and developing Nuxt modules very easy. From this kit, we'll only be using two of the composable utilities, and that's define Nuxt module and add plugin. But there are a lot more that's actually available, and you can just visit this page in the documentation to learn more about it. Alright, so after Nuxt kit, we have this module options interface that's been exported, and what this is just an interface that defines the shape of the options that your module will accept. So let's say your module needs a specific value in order to work properly. You can actually define that value here in module options, and when the user is actually registering the module, they can pass that value and it will be passed here in this options that's coming from the module in your Nuxt config file. The define Nuxt module composable, it gives us a lot of properties out the box that makes developing a module very easy. For instance, we have the meta object, and this allows us to give our module a name, a config key, and this config key is the key that the user will add inside the Nuxt config file so they can actually pass options to your module. You also get to declare the compatibility, so you can state what versions of Nuxt this module is compatible with, and you can also state the version of this module. The default object will just be an object of the default values that should be used within the module. So let's say the add plugin value was not defined by the user, then this default value will be used throughout the module. The setup function is where you would write most of your module logic. The setup function passes the options parameter and the Nuxt instance. So the options parameter, this is basically the options that the user will pass in via the Nuxt config file, and this Nuxt parameter is the Nuxt instance when your application is starting up. Alright, so with that explanation out of the way, let's start coding our module. The first thing I want to do is to import the server from socket.io. So I'm going to import from socket.io, and I'm going to get the server. The next thing I want to do is declare a different option for my module, and the option that I want the user to pass in is actually a function that accepts the server instance. So I'm going to define that here. I'm going to call it the socket functions, and like I said, it's going to be a function that accepts IO and returns nothing. Let me change the name of my module. I'm going to change it to Nuxt internal socket, and the config key that I want the user to pass into the Nuxt config file is socket IO, like that. For the defaults, I'm not going to declare any defaults. I'm just going to make this null. And then, because I need this function in order for the module to work properly, I'm going to just do an if check right here to see if this function was actually declared by the user. And if it was not declared by the user, I'm going to print an error message and then close the Nuxt instance or throw an error. So I'm going to say if not options, the socket functions. Thank you, GitHub Copilot. I'm going to throw an error that says, please provide the socket function. And I'm going to await Nuxt.close. And in order for this to work, I have to make this function, the setup function, asynchronous. And that should do it for that part. In addition to closing this, closing the Nuxt instance, I want to actually print a pretty message in the console. So to do that, I'm going to use two more packages, and the packages are Chalk and Boxen. So I'm going to npm I Chalk Boxen. Good, both packages are installed. And then I'm going to create the function that prints the error message inside my runtime directory. So I'm just going to name it error out.ts. And in here, I'm going to import the two packages. So import Boxen from Boxen and import Chalk from Chalk. And this file will export a default function. And this function will accept an error message. It should be a string. And I'm just going to go ahead and paste the code that I have for this function in here and explain it to you guys. So once we get the error message, I'm going to console that error, and I'm going to use Boxen to put all of this inside of a box in the console. I'm going to print the error message that's passed in red and make this error bold. And then Chalk is going to print the rest of the messages. You can see where it says step 1, create a new file anywhere in your project root, and it's given the instructions on how to create that file. Ensure that the file is exporting a function that accepts an IO instance. So this is what the file should look like. 3, you should add the plugin to your nuxtconfig.js file or ts, and then it shows what that importation should look like. And then for the key, this config key that I declared over here, socket IO or socket IO, you can just pass the socket functions after importing them. So let's save this and head back over here. Since we're going to use it in here, let's just import it. And we're going to call it error out from runtime error out. Good. So if the user did not provide the socket functions, I'm going to show that error message. And I'm just going to use the same message right here. Good. So now that that is out of the way, let's go ahead and hook into the server hook that Nuxt provides. So if we go Nuxt.hook, if we open some quotation and press Control space, you should see a list of hooks that is provided by Nuxt. So the one that we're going to use is the listen hook. There it is. And the listen hook actually returns the server. So we're going to create a function that takes a server and we're going to do something with it. Now within this hook, as you can see, GitHub Copilot is already suggesting it. I'm going to create the socket.io instance, and then I'm going to pass the instant to the socket functions that the user provided. Next, we want to add the plugin to our Nuxt application, and this plugin will just add socket.io client so it can be used anywhere within our application. So right here in this add plugin composable or utility that NuxtKit provides, we can pass the location of the plugin like this, or we can pass an object and give the path to the source key. I'm going to also specify the mode because I want this plugin to run only on the client. So once you hit save, we can head to the runtime directory and open the plugin.ts file. Now within this plugin.ts file, we can import the socket.io client from socket.io client, and then within our plugin, let's just remove this, we can create the client instance. So it's const.io equal to socket, and we'll be connecting to the index part of our application. So our Nuxt plugin actually give us the option of returning the provide object, and we can add any variable or function to the Nuxt instance via this provide object. So what we need to do is to enter return and provide, and we want to provide this IO to our entire Nuxt application. And the way that we use this within our Nuxt application, which you will see later on, is by saying const equal use Nuxt app, and then you can use IO like this. So let's just delete that and save. And that's pretty much it for our modules development. What we need to do now is to test it out in the playground. So let's just go to the playground folder, open our Nuxt config file, and you can see where we are importing this module from our source directory over here, and we are registering it within our Nuxt config file. So let me just change the name of this to socket, and this object that you're seeing right here should represent the config key. So let me just remove that and get our config key from the module. And our config key is actually looking for socket functions. So you can define this within the Nuxt config file, but I think it would be better if you defined a function outside of the config file and imported it into the config file for use. So let's just go ahead and do that right now. So let's create a new file. I'm just gonna call it sockets index.ts, and remember that this file should export a default function that accepts the IO instant, and then you can actually use socket.io within this function. So like the ID is suggesting, we can log into the console that a user connected once the connection event is fired by socket.io. So let's just save this and head back to the Nuxt config file, and I'm going to import that. From and then I'm going to pass the socket function to the socket function key. Alright, so once that's in place, we can hit save, and then let's run our application to see if it's working properly. Currently our application is just this text, Nuxt module playground. So let's open our terminal, npm dev, and let's go to Chrome to see what's happening over there. And we can see our application running here. And let's look in VS Code's terminal to see if we have the text being printed out that a user is connected. And there it is. So we can actually confirm that our module is working properly. So now with our module working properly, we can actually just go ahead and use it in our Nuxt application. So I'm just going to demonstrate how you'd actually use it. Within our script tags, we can just import the IO instance from the use Nuxt app composable, and it's available right there. And the send message function is just going to emit this event called message, and it's going to send this object, so message that says hello from Nuxt.js. So let's just save that, and within our socket.io function that we provided to our Nuxt config, we actually want to listen for this event. So we're gonna say socket.on, and the event name was message, and we're just going to log message. So let's hit save, and you realize that we're not getting a lot of help from our IDE as far as this IO variable is concerned. So we can just type it by importing socket from socket.io, or server rather, not socket, server, because it's of this type. So now if we say socket dot, we get all the different methods and properties that are actually on the socket. So let's hit save and restart our server. And once that's up and running, we can head back to Chrome to see what's happening over there. So if we click on this send message button a few times, we should see the message printed in our console. And there it is. Clicked it 3 times. So that's just the tip of the iceberg, guys. You can use the Nuxt modules to do a lot of things with your Nuxt application. The source code for this module will be in the description. You can check it out. I will probably publish it to NPM, so you can actually look for it there as well. Until next time, peace.